In the first panel this morning, we'll analyze the importance of the genetics and the post-harvest of blueberries, and this panel will have the presentation of introduction by Mr. Raúl Olivares, who is an advisor of the Blueberry Board in Chile, who will discuss the genetic programs. Then we'll have representatives from the different regions, and in the presentation of Fall Creek, Jason Walcott, Pablo Clagues from Hortifruti, Ignacio Franhuesa from Greenfield Mountain Blue, and Matias Alessandrini Lafrute Osblue. The moderator will be the president of Ecofruit, Mr. Manuel José Alcaíno, de Ecofruit. Raúl Olivares with the master is agronomist and from the University of Chile. He has an experience of 28 years and dedicated professionally to the advising for the blueberry development. He worked in Disco as a agronomist in the region of Chillán, and finally he was a manager of production in Chile. Presently, he is a private consultant and advising the blueberry board and the private parties, and particularly in the blueberry board for the evaluation of new varieties. I give the floor now to Mr. Raúl Olivares Bustamante. Hello. Thank you very much. Well, it is a pleasure to greet you, and I would like to thank the organization for inviting me and to give a presentation on a topic that deals with the situation of the blueberry industry today, particularly in Chile. So, first of all, we should start by the beginning. We should know that the blueberry is a crop that commercially is studied in New Jersey, in that area, in the Atlantic coast at the beginning of the 20th century. And Elizabeth White, with a researcher from the USDA, started to collect different of these varieties of the Vaccinium corimbosum, and based on this genetic material, they recovered the first variety in 1916, the Rubel cultivar. And the blueberry, and therefore is relatively new, that is to say 100 years old compared to other crops that date back to 2,000 years. So Dr. Coville was the domesticator of this variety, and all the stories has heroes and different players. And in here we have a group of researchers who are relevant for the improvement of the blueberry throughout the years. Part Frederick Caulfield, we have Mrs. White, and different other authors or researchers whose contribution was go and collect different wild species of different vaccinum varieties or species to further include more characteristic genetic characteristics to the Vaccinum corimbosum in order to provide more features or characteristics as they would expect from the production point of view or for consumption purposes. So in here we have some of these species concerning the Vaccinium genus. And in here we can see the distribution throughout the Atlantic coast of the United States and how they are spread with the different species of Vaccinum. And you can observe the black region in the Mexico Gulf, where we have the Vaccinum darwii, and it was very relevant for the further development of the global blueberry industry. Another important thing to point out is that the species we have diploides, tetraploid, and dexaploids, and this shows a genetic distance existing in the different groups of these uh, genii. And this means that the further hybridations that occurred, there are some issues related to the pollinization. When we started to plant the blueberries a long while ago, we were very concerned about having varieties that were mixed up. We were showing also in the cross pollinization, and then we were more confident and we started to plant major blocks of just one single variety. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work because we don't have the right variety or the complement that is going to do the pollinization and to allow better quality for the fruit.
Here we see some new species of vaccinum that have been added to this genetic material with some features that are quite interesting for the future development of blueberry. Low cold requirement, adaptation to mineral soils. The blueberries started as a crop with a organic rich soil, and then we have been adding characteristics to make the varieties grow well in poorer soils, more sandy soils. So this is very important. Also drought resistance, the Vaccinum arboretum that also have been added to this material in our varieties. Here we have the composition of a variety that you are familiar with, that was made from the germplasm collected by Alan Draper O'Neill in Chile, composed by 4 species of vaccinum. Biloxi, quite significant for the growth of Peru and Mexico, at least in the start, and other 5 vaccinum, which has 5 vaccinum species in its genetic pool. Here, like I showed you, the contribution of Vaccinum darrowi, which has been fundamental for the southern high bush development, varieties that require cold or don't require cold, and were responsible for the expansion of the blueberry geography, being or going from a cold crop to varieties that have a low cold requirement and have become global. We can say that this is now a worldwide species. There is a variety for each weather. The Chat Blue variety in 1976, sharp blue, we can see in the picture on the top right. So, thinking about selecting varieties and thinking about our fields and geographies, this is a division based on the genetic composition of each species. We have the northern high bush, the north of the United States, and which is the Vaccinum corymbushum, the original one, which are cold species, as a over 750 hours as a standard. Here the varieties are Duke, Blue Corp, Brigida, Elia, Draper. Some of them are not being grown anymore because they are not commercially required. And the southern high bush, which are hybrids of Vaccinum corymbosum with Vaccinum darrowi, has a mid cold requirements, and we are talking about Legacy O'Neill and other species. The rabbit eyes also have been quite important in the market, especially in some areas in which it adapts very well. This is the Vaccinum virgatum species, that comes from Georgia in the United States. They have a low to medium cold requirement, and what their advantage does they are from flower to maturity. It has a long period, so it is a later variety for warmer areas. Brightwell, powder blue, Oclocony, and other varieties, which are the half heights. They are hybrids of Vaccinum corymbosum and Vaccinium angustifolium, come from the north of the United States, a mix of wild blueberry and others, and the advantage that it requires cold weather, has to be in a very cold area, and provides higher quality fruit. Here, a North Blue, a variety that represents this group very well, and the Low Bush varieties, which is basically fruits that we freeze. These are these very low bushes or blueberry prairies. Other classifications, it's the cold requirement, the high chill, which between 750 to 1200 hours of cold temperature. This will depend the high, middle, and low evergreen. So when it comes to selecting a variety, we need to think about a couple of things. Adaptation needs to be a variety that is well adapted to the climate. The period of time, the harvest period must be aligned with the demand brackets in the target market. Quality, size, flavor, appearance, and firmness. Also, differentiation. Our varieties must be better than the current ones and have to compete with others to reach better prices. And productivity. This is basically for producers in a scenario in which prices will not increase much because there is a higher supply. We need to lower production costs, and this is directly related to the amount of kilos we are able to produce in the same piece of land. So improvement is not a destination, it is a journey. It's not about reaching a variety and stay in there. We need to continue working with the genetic material to come up with new varieties for the future. So genetic breeding and improvement has to do with programs that launch new varieties every year. And this large amount of varieties, it's a challenge for technical professionals and agronomers, because once we learn to manage a variety, a new one comes up, and there are many of them. So it's quite complex to get to know, to adapt, to learn how to manage different varieties, a large number of varieties that are constantly changing and really taking the place of others. And we need to learn how to manage them, these new varieties. And to characterize a variety on the ground takes years of work. New varieties, publics or privates? Well, the good news is that there are many new varieties and we have a lot to pick from. But they are not all, some of them are private. We have Legacy and other varieties. There's no longer a situation in which these are all publicly available and being fostered and open. The new varieties are private with licenses that protect intellectual property. There are other varieties that are vertically traded in terms a genetic producer, trader, and retailers. They all have their specific places. Also, vertical integration looks for productive excellency or excellence with and commercial excellence with the support, specialized technical support, specific markets, and differentiated sales. So I need to have good quality products and a commercial team that is able to sell that variety to a specific market, and they are able to sell that exclusively. Today, the easiest way for a producer is to buy plants of a certain variety to pay for the value of the royalties and keep the fruit. And then we can add royalties to the fruit. And then we can add sales through an exclusive trader and also an exclusive market. So maybe you can pay for the first three things. You have the plant, the royalties, and you work with a exclusive trader. But the reception of that fruit for Chile is of another company. So your exporter cannot sell to China because there is another competitor that has already purchased a license for that market. So be careful with that. So here's a little bit how it works. The geneticists, the companies, the producers, the traders. So where should the emphasis be put in terms of genetic breeding? Genetic development has been intensive in varieties for low code requirement. There is a debt of geneticists vis-a-vis the renewal of varieties with high code requirements. So we don't have so many varieties of high code requirements able to replace those highs. Are not developed as fast as the low ones. So in Chile, for the center and south, they're not in the United States, in Canada, so it's not so easy to replace these varieties. And our late varieties, they meet the early varieties of other countries, which are new varieties, big varieties, and tasty varieties. And our varieties have remained the same. So let's see what we understand regarding the genetic material that is currently being traded around the world. First, the University of Florida has, with Dr. Paul Irene, and Star, Emerald, Jewel, and Misty varieties, older ones. Emerald, newer varieties in 2015, such as Avanti, Key Crisp, and Endura, which are under the Evergreen system and that are also present in Chile. The University of Georgia and the Rabbit Eye program. Not only Rabbit Eye, led by Dr. Scott Nesmith. We have varieties like a Camellia and Susie Blue that have already been mentioned. They are very important for the varietal renewal in Chile, and also low cold requirement. There are very promising varieties: Georgia Dawn, Miss Lily, Blue Duchess, Early Duchess, and Sweet Duchess. Here a picture of Susie Blue to illustrate what I'm saying. The University of Michigan, a colder part of the United States, and its breeding is also aimed at high cold requirement species. Aurora, Draper, and Liberty. And Liberty is already exiting the market. New programs like Osorno and Calypso that are also using this material. Costa, a Australian company. Australians, they don't have no more than 2,000 hectares, but they have a great breeding program. The area of Corindi to the north of Sydney have developed an interesting group of evergreen varieties such as Arana and Kira, a very important variety with a lot of very high production. Associated to these Australian companies that own the genetic material. Driscoll, with one of the most aggressive programs together with Fall Creek, because they managed all lines of varieties, the early varieties, the low and high cold requirements, and the late varieties as well. And they are working very strongly in each of them. They have a group of low cold requirement varieties: Regina, Rosita, Raimi, and Stella Blue. They are present in Peru. And those with medium and high cold requirements. Some of them have been more successful than others. And I say that Serbia has most of these varieties because they don't have other materials available. Fall Creek and Farm and Nursery, a company with a very aggressive program, with breeding programs for many lines, low, medium, and high cold requirement. It's a company that offers plants of different origins, and you can trade them directly, and they have other more restrictive programs like sequoias. But I can't give you much details about that. But you can talk to the company during the convention. And the Berry Blue genetics of Hortifruit and Royal Berries SL. They have varieties such as Rosillo, Corona, Apollo, Daybreak, Stellar, and Keepsake. Rosillo was interesting at some time, but now Hortifruit is providing more than anything the Apollo variety. Mountain Blue Orchards, also an Australian company with a very interesting program and history. They have a group of varieties such as Eureka with the low cold requirement. Very interesting given the firmness and the quality of the fruit. Oregon, Blueberry Farms and Nursery, and Global Plant Genetics. Here we have some high cold requirement varieties that have been introduced this year, and there are two varieties being introduced in Chile: Megas Blue and Titanium, from Sunny Ridge, by Sunny Ridge. And we hope that we can see this on the ground at some time. Oz Blue, another Australian company in the area of Perth, and they have all these varieties that you are well aware of. Some of them are in Chile. There are more exclusive varieties, the OZ varieties, Bonita, Julieta, Magica, etc.
We also have new programs that are coming up. We don't see many of them here in Chile. There are some of these Australian varieties and from Peru, and with varieties that are producing within the first years of cultivation. And therefore, we need to be very close, attentive to them, where to know where they can be produced. Now, I will tell you a little bit about what the Blueberry Board is doing in order to validate new varieties, and this is, as a matter of fact, an invitation, as Julia would say, to all the companies that are interested in participating so that we can do the follow up to retrieve information. And this information should be trustworthy and dependent and publicly available, because one of the major frustrations that we have is to have a variety and to plant, and then we realize that it's useless. And therefore, the objective of this program is to share the trustworthy information that is independent and publicly available. We are working on this area with six trials with the 230 plants in Yerba Buenas region, and La Union, another locality. And each one of these trials, tests, we are measuring the performance by harvest with the support of Nice Blue, and we have the Center of Post Harvest from the University of Chile, and we can measure the tolerance to bromide and different elements, and we can characterize the varieties, and we are fine-tuning all of these study to see how the plant grows, how it is pruned, and how it's managed, and how the fruit behaves. I will show you here a few pictures concerning all of these activities. First of all, a little bit of what we're doing, and this should be an in-depth discussion, but just to give you a taste of it, you can see how it was working in 2022. We have the soils, the layers, the harvest, and Petit Blue, the first up to the first week of January from December, and the Legacy variety. In 2023, we have the plants a little bit taller in the winter time after pruning, and in here you can see some of these tests in the month of January, and in here we can develop a more sustainable plants. And we'll have the latest events in March 23 with the plants that are still green, but we don't need to use palisades. And now concerning the fruits, and in here you can see the fruits that are harvested in December or the first week of January. We have berries of 19 grams, 9 grams per gram, the size number 16, and in here you can see these measuring devices that we have at the Blueberry Board. This is very easy to compare in terms of the harvest and the management. Here we have the post-harvest management of this variety, Nice Blue. The firmness at 25 days of storage at the ambient temperature, room temperature, and we have the size of 16 millimeters. That is basically the size of this variety. Then we have the chart showing the firmness, the measurement that they took there. And in this chart, we can compare this variety to the rest of the varieties, and within the different treatments that they are providing to the plants, you can see the firmness of this peachy blue, and the size 16.5, and bigger or taller than the peachy blue. And besides peachy blue, we have, for example, these fall brick projects with Loreto and different other varieties, and are included in the project. But we don't still receive the plants. We still that they can come out of the nurseries to get those plants. And this is the situation 2022, 2023. There is this farm in Los Angeles, and this is the plants that were established in October last year, and in March they are developing very well. And this allows to go into the pruning activities and to do the pruning with fruits and without fruits, and maybe thinning the plants to measure them and to see how the size and the flavor behave. Olympus is another variety that is also being included in this group. We are developing this project in Yerba Buena, and we didn't get enough fruit to do the measuring, and this is only a few pictures with the treatment of pruning after the harvest. In the case of these plants are evergreen, they are harvested at the end of the January in the case of Chile. I would like to make some comments now. We have the crop of arandano that has been developed in the few decades, and we have more acreage of acres of these plants, and this is a key fruit for development of this tree, and there is continuous coming of new varieties and establishing the standards for cultivation for each one of the varieties a long process. As Felipe showed, we need to have information that is trustworthy to validate the information and to share this information with a certain degree of accountability. For Chile, we have challenges including the distance from the market, so we need fruit that has a very good post-harvest life or shelf life, and we need this is a major challenge for us because in the particular case of Chile, and these the region where we have less varieties, so every thing that we can receive from different companies as varieties is welcome. And hopefully we can study those varieties and to do the follow-up of them to share this information with the Chilean farmers. So this is all my presentation for today, and I hope I observed the time limits.